Hey everybody, how's it going? I am in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada at the Connect IT conference in here, Vegas. And if you see my white background, my camera's not great, but we're not going to be looking at my camera too much. See if I can do any balancing. Nope, that's okay. Because today we're going to talk about policies. So I should be sharing my screen. We're going to be doing a little deep dive action on these. We're going to talk about, what they are, why we use them, uh, how they fit into a greater client strategy. Obviously, this is going to be, and it is recorded. I'm going to hide my top bar. And I'm going to do this one a little bit informal, mostly because I'm, again, mid-conference. But usually how we do these is I go through it, I explain it, I show it, and that's cool. But I think for the sake of simplicity, because this one's a little bit more complex than the ones we've done in the past, um, I'm going to be doing mostly PowerPoint stuff for the first half, and then mostly like actual Cloud Radio stuff for the second half. So let's take a look at what we got, and that will buy me enough time for people to actually roll in. So let's go straight to the about, right? So if you're new to the deep dive in Cloud Radio, this is where we don't just say, hey, this is a high level, this is the gist of it. We go deeper, right? We talk about the specific settings, we talk about what to press, what not to press, and where to apply it, and all that kind of stuff. I'm your host, Cloud Radio Experts. Talk to a lot of people, right? I've set up a lot of policies for people, advised a lot of people on policies. So I feel like I'm pretty qualified to do this. Next up, right? Specifically, we're going to be covering in again, what the policies are actually for, how to best set them up. That can vary dramatically from one person to the other. How you can scale them, right? Because policies, as you'll see, seem a little bit tricky to actually make sure that they are applicable to different types of clients. And then again, the most important part that we got to get out of this together is that these aren't just a thing you do and then you drop it, right? They're part of a bigger strategy as a whole. So before we get started, I wanted to do a quick, I guess almost like a shout out to one of the dependencies for the policies. Now, policies, as we'll see, are kind of these rules that you set against stuff, right? That stuff can come from multiple places. One of the primary places that we get this stuff is going to be the Cloud Radio agent. So what I threw this slide on here for was mostly for, after they get sent out to the recording, you have the instructions and the why and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to talk about how it kind of works and why you may want it, and it's ultimately obviously up to you to decide how you feel about it. But our agent is basically capturing in information from people's endpoints and servers, right? I made a clear point to say this is not an RMM. So if you don't know, there's no execution capabilities, there's no management functionality. It is purely a grab it and report it back into Cloud Radio. So there's a lot of people that are hesitant about it, obviously, understandably, but it's really important for us because this is how we standardize how the policies run, right? We know how the agent grabs the stuff, so we know how the policies can apply to it. If I want to look for SSDs, I know exactly how the agent checks for SSDs, and it makes that really easy for us, right? So this slide is mostly for people that are going to be getting this recording and watching after, if you haven't already, to help you kind of understand why this is a good dependency to have or why it's an important one. So let's go straight to what do the policies actually do, right? So there's a lot of different things we could talk about, but the simplest way to kind of phrase these is that they're going to reference certain key data points, right? Again, mostly from the agent, but not exclusively. Sometimes their license counts, sometimes their Office 365 data. We'll see all that in a sec. And really what we try to do is rather than dump just a bunch of technical data on everybody and try to sort it through like an RMM reporter, even like what the agent I just showed you, right? This is just a brief snippet of a screenshot of it. It's not really terribly helpful to people. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to take these rules, these policies, and filter them in such a way that if somebody non-technical is going through their account, if an account manager is walking a person through it, they basically have very easy to grasp business standards to kind of correlate these policies to. So you'll see on the right-hand side, I got this chart. It's your pretty typical stoplight, red, yellow, green type thing. And again, it's just filtering through saying, hey, here's how we're doing in our security. Here's how we're doing compliance, productivity, and so on, right? So again, super important to make the policies actionable, as we'll see, and super important to make them understandable to the common person. So when we look at the actual setup of these, it's easy to do one, it's hard to do a lot of them, right? Because there's a lot of coordination to do it. Now, obviously, if you take it step by step, it's pretty good, but I wanted to break down the kind of the anatomy of it. And policies are going to be comprised of three main sections. So there's a description one, which is really purely for, again, talking through it, right? You don't have to have something that's complete technical jargon. For example, if we talk about how there may not be an SSD. That may be fine for 90% of people, but maybe for the other 10%, they don't get that, right? They might just need to say, hey, you have slow drives, you have slow boot speed, something like that, right? So we can kind of get creative on how we describe what these policies are checking for. It doesn't have to be technical jargon. Next, we have the alerting. To be honest with you guys, I don't see that many people using this because it's not strictly speaking necessary. Obviously, you could do this. This is going to be tied into, depending on whether you have a PSA, even just an email connection, you can set these policies to trigger notifications. So a common use case, again, is maybe I'm having to look for an antivirus. I don't find it. I want it to open up a ticket saying I didn't find it on so-and-so computer. Cloud Radio can do that. The reason it's not used that much is typically because MSPs have what? RMMs, right? So these RMMs are already capturing this data, and usually there's a bit of an overlap. Certainly a useful feature for people just getting started, but for the most part, right, you kind of already have, most people already have something there. The last one's really important though. So the risk scoring. So we're gonna, again, see all this live in a minute after I'm done with this kind of like stage setting PowerPoints, but the risk scoring is how Cloud Radio knows how severe these things are. Like we saw in this slide, there's that stoplight, right? These red, yellow, greens aren't arbitrary. These are based off of your standards. So when you look at the risk scoring, basically what we're saying is what category does it fall under? How much risk does it incur? And how do you want to score that? And again, we'll dive deeper into it when we look at the actual example. So every single one of these things, right? The more thought you put into it and the more effort you put, the easier time you're going to have explaining it to people. Your easier time you're going to have like getting value out of it. So it's certainly worth your time to actually audit what you got and either change the defaults or just build brand new ones. So when we look at the next one, the other really important question for a lot of people is how do you scale these policies? Because for a lot of people, the pain from anything like this isn't doing it for people, it's doing it consistently. It's you could technically do what we're talking about right now with an RMM report from any RMM, but it's really difficult because you'd have to maybe manually audit, who has what, who doesn't, and it could be done, but it's really tedious. So we want to make these kind of set it and forget it, and there's definitely a way to do that. So those who are already familiar with Cloud Radial, we're going to focus on doing this at the content level. And if we understand how to create a default set of policies, how to create kind of these core rules, we can start to get clever with it, right? You don't just have to have a global iron fist standard that we need to see 8 gigs of RAM on every single computer. It's like maybe, but maybe certain other computers, right? Maybe for certain legal industries, let's say, need to apply to stricter standards. So maybe we need to create a different set of standards that are stricter to those. So we're going to look at how we can take these different kind of like sets of standards, these policy standards, and apply them to different types of clients to get really clever with how we basically score people. And I want to also point out something that happens a lot, right? It's not a perfect process. The same way that the RMM has hiccups, Cloud Radial stuff has hiccups, but not really in the technical sense. What happens with a lot of people is they understandably come with the expectation that the policies are going to be like perfect. But the issue is that things can vary, and sometimes there's disagreements between the RMM and the agent and all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, we want to focus on the main point, right? This is not something that you're going to be using to manage their environment, right? We're not logging in and doing stuff and deploying and fixing, patching. Nope. This is literally just something that when the client logs into their portal and they want to know what's going on, they have insight into it that is tailored and understandable to them. So what we're going to consider is maybe just a straight up error, right? Very rare. Honestly, I have not seen like just straight errors happen very often, like ever. Exceptions are super common. We're going to look at how to handle that. I'll just tell you one verbally. A lot of times what'll happen is you set your standard. Again, let's just use RAM as an example. 8 gigs, right? Cool. But there's that one network monitoring PC that has 4 gigs. And yeah, technically Cloud Radial is telling you that one of the PCs is slow and it's dragging down the score. What do, right? We can mark certain ones as exceptions, which is basically you acknowledge it with the client saying, hey, this is our standard, but this guy gets a pass, right? So that could be used both for that type of example, or even if there is an error, you're not sitting there glaring with that, mistake right there. You can say, hey, don't know why this messed up, and you can move on really quickly. And then the last part is going to be the disagreements, right? Disagreements happen when the technicality of the agent is different than the technicality of your RMM. So what I put over here on this little check out this policy parameter article is the literal technical definitions of how Cloud Radial looks at certain aspects. So I'll pull that up real quick. That's really important because what'll happen kind of inevitably is that you're going to want to know, how does Cloud Radio look for these things? And if your RMM is looking for it in a certain way and giving you the green light on something, Cloud Radio Agent isn't, right? You don't necessarily want to spend a whole bunch of time, arguing that or fighting that. You just want to understand how we're looking at it. So this linked article, I always tell people that I talk to, is not a fun read. I don't recommend you just take your weekday and read through it. But if you're starting to see some kind of an error or a consistent, that you're just like, oh, that's not true. They definitely have something. You should check this article because it's going to literally tell you exactly how it checks for it, what it's looking for. And you may find something very easily saying like, oh, this checks in with the security center. And it turns out that our AV doesn't check in with that. So you can move on from there, right? You can remove the policy, you can edit the policy. There's options. So when I talk about this one, it's really important because again, a lot of people get hung up on it, but remember, the greater goal is to just have that conversation with the client about what we're going to do. And that's the next point, really. It's looking at these policies during this webinar is not going to be just looking at the policies, which we will. It's going to be how you can use them in tandem with other stuff, right? Third-party reports. Maybe you straight up want to use these in tandem with RMM reports. Maybe you want to use them with other vendors, right? Maybe you got like killer BrightGauge dashboards that you want to also supplement with these and vice versa, or whatever. It's okay. We can do that, right? Same thing with direct reporting integrations, lots of stuff that can get fed into Cloud Radio directly, right? That's going to be really useful to bundle it up. And even in the wrap up Cloud Radio reports, because Cloud Radio can run PDF reports and these policies make it in those reports. That's one of the things you can include in the actual physical PDFs. And most importantly, the top thing that you should take away from this is the planner. Even if it's not Cloud Radio Planner, weirdly enough, because what we really want to answer during this webinar is the question of so what? And I see this time and time again. I'm guilty of it. I promise you're guilty of it. At least you have been, right? Of just reporting for reporting's sake, just getting up there and doing the old, you can see, and this is, right? It's good. We have plenty of data. MSPs have never had a lack thereof, but we need to spawn some decisions. We need to spawn some action. So what I suggest here is using the native planner that Cloud Radio has built in, because that way we can literally correlate what we're seeing to what we want to do. And it's a lot easier for the client to grasp the action plan. And again, we're going to look at this. This is going to be kind of like the main driver of our conversation. Last but not least, on the PowerPoint, we have the help with the policies, right? Where can you find help with these? We'll circle back, right? Whether it's for agent deployment or even just policy help or whatever, great community. A lot of people that are really helpful, a lot of really smart folk out there that have figured out some really neat stuff. So that's worth a check. This is a course one that I used for a previous webinar. The support people, right? Our support team is super knowledgeable in this, right? We have tons of help that we can do. We can advise you. So feel free to hit us up there. And we just launched a different type of professional service where previously we used to launch professional services where it was like, hey, what do you need help on? And we kind of went to it. We've kind of turned it into a menu system. Honorable mention to that because I've been working on it for a while. So if we could look back at our jump starts, right? cloudradio.com/jumpstart. There's literal guides on how to do all this. So when you get a jump start now, rather than us just giving you a chit chat and a double check, you're going to get an expert that's literally going to walk you through how it works. You're going to get an actual operations guide that tells you exactly how to modify it, what to do with it, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot stronger. So if you're wanting to do this and the guy who should be doing this or gal that should be doing this isn't on the call, you're not reliant on them watching a 80-day-old Zoom recording for it, right? You literally have a playbook to do so. So all good stuff, right? Obviously can be really helpful, but let's take a look at some actual practice. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to reveal my secret. I'm going to have an iPad so I can walk through all the stuff I showed you and we can do it in order. Huh, look at that. So I don't have to awkwardly switch screens. Pretty smart, right? Okay, so let's take a look at the first thing. So as promised, let's take a look at the agent. Again, agent data, not RMM. The way that it works right off the bat is we're going to start off with infrastructure. Like I said, it's not the whole deal, but it's a big chunk of it. So when we look at infrastructure, if you look, get that agent on there. This is the demo site that we have. These are my endpoints. There's a lot of them, right? Very similar to an RMM, right? We don't argue. We don't, want to fight the fact there's going to be a lot of stuff in here that's really, really similar to an RMM. Again, think client facing. So I'll use my own computer right here. The idea just in of itself is that if I were to click on this computer, right, it pulls up a bunch of information that the agent shoots out, right? So it's like, hey, look, tell you when my OS was updated and tell you that I'm ready for Windows 11. I got Well, policy exceptions. Oh, spoilers, right? Storage drive stuff. You can see my location. That is not where I'm at right now, but my agent's not actually activated. And then a bunch of configuration data, blah, 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 right? So cool. But this is what I was talking about. While this may be interesting, it's not particularly helpful to a client as is, right? There's lots of stuff in here that's really good, but I promise you, I actually can't, because maybe you do have clients that are like this, but 99% of people are going to see this and just like, whoa, overload, can't do it, right? So again, be thinking about how this is all aggregated in the portal. It's there, it's visible. Certainly a technical person like an account manager or even a technician can look at this stuff, but not particularly helpful by itself. So when we jump down to the actual policies, what's going to happen is all of this data and then some is organized like this, right? Oh, that's legible. There's like, what, 7 things here. So now instead of having to rifle through 800 computers and try to figure out who has what AV, which I'd have to do one by one, I can just go, hey, show me the issues or show me the opportunities. And again, business oriented, focused. So as I kind of expand and walk through this, basically it's as simple as going, hey, let's take a look at the security problems or security concerns or however you want to phrase it, right? Now what I do is I have a giant list on the right-hand side that tells me all of the stuff that I need to look into. So let's take a look at one, right? So let's say this very first one, right? Antivirus third party in the endpoint. Okay, so I kind of got the policy description. This is what I was saying we can change. We'll look at that in a sec. I have a little bit of a more detailed description beneath that kind of tells you why we even care to look for it. And then when I click on the policy from here, what it's going to do is it's going to tell me all of the offenders, right? We call these the exceptions. Basically the people that are, short of pointing fingers, it's basically like who's a rule breaker. So you can see that I've got a couple of these guys here. And then what happens is if I click on any given one, so for example, this Jeff Ferris guy, I don't know who he is. It basically pops in and it gives me his direct information, right? And I can see, oh, he's got Windows Defender. Wait a minute, Windows Defender. I thought I just came from a policy that says he doesn't have any AV. Well, that's one of the things we need to talk about. It's really important. A lot of these policies have parameters. So we're going to talk about how those affect it. And what these parameters are is you tell us, right? You set your policies to look for what you care about, hence your standards, right? There's no one size fits all because everybody does it different, right? Well, especially when it comes to security, right? You might have multiple security vendors, or maybe you have Webroot and somebody else has Sophos or whatever, and that causes a weird conflict. So a lot of people, what happens is when they first start with Cloud Radial, all the policies that we're going to look at right now come with the portal. They're already built in. So if you just launch with them, chances are you're going to look real foolish, real fast, because they might be set to standards that aren't yours, right? So take a look at them, right? We're going to look at how and make sure that they're actually good before you show them to clients. Otherwise, you're going to lose trust like that, right? The clients are going to go, it's completely wrong. Nope, we absolutely do have AV. I don't know what you're talking about. There's no faster way to make a bad move, right? So when we really look at this, again, dialing it in is a big part of the process first and foremost. So when we look at, let's just build a new one really quick for kicks. Let's go ahead and see the anatomy of one. Let's go ahead and add one, right? When you look at the anatomy of it, again, it's not rocket science. It's actually pretty simple. It's just a lot of them depending on what you care about. So the first thing Cloud Radial is going to ask you is, what type of policy? There's a lot of different types you could have, right? Application, domain, endpoint. You can see, again, some of these like endpoint policies obviously are going to come from the endpoint, but some of the other stuff like, wait, license policies? What's that about? Well, it turns out that Cloud Radial can catch unused Office 365 licenses and flag those as certain types of risks, right? So again, not all about the agent, but the agent derives a lot of the more, I don't know, maybe compliance and security based ones because it needs to know what's running on that machine, but not always. So let's go ahead and use one of the endpoint ones since I got that. So you can see that I have a predefined list of stuff to pick from. And then when I look at the actual policy itself, I'm not freehand writing this. And we get a lot of questions as to, it's like, well, the agent's on there. Can I look for stuff? Can I have it? Oh, there's a certain registry key and stuff. The answer is no right now, obviously, right? There's no custom or everything because we know that it can get out of hand real quick. We want to make these obviously wide. We want to make sure that you can look for the stuff you actually care about, but we want to make this repeatable and scalable. And the moment that we pull that away and make you have custom stuff, you have now added a tremendous amount of workload in updating and making sure it's accurate and all that kind of stuff. If we have these preset categories, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's way easier. So when we look at this, right, we got the endpoint, we got the different policies, healthy list, right? Especially with Windows 11, special shout out to that, right? A lot of people want to track the readiness. They want to track certain things from there, and that can spawn a great discussion. And I'm not saying Cloud Radio is the only tool, certainly not, but this is a great tool to have that discussion and to cut that off, right? To be proactive with it, to show people it's like, hey, this thing's coming, we got to handle it. Slam dunk conversation that you've had by pressing what, 2 buttons so far? Pretty good. But either way, let's keep looking. So let's say we go, let's take something really simple, a monitor count. Okay. So we know it's on the endpoint, we know it's on the monitor count. And what happens is the moment I click a policy, I'll do another one just for kicks, right? See how it says monitor count, minimum number of monitors. If I go into encrypted hard drive, it's going to snap all the client descriptions to the preset values, which is cool. It's fine. But this is what I was talking about during the PowerPoint part. It's like, well, what if nobody knows what modern disk storage is and nobody, somehow they don't know what monitor count is, right? Maybe we want to rename that. So maybe I want to call this dual monitor check. Cool, right? This is what's actually going to get displayed to the client. Same thing, that little sub description we talked about earlier, checks for a minimum number of monitor. Obviously, the dual implies checks for computers without 2 monitors. We think a little bit like these terms, right? Because this policy, what it's going to do, it's going to mark the people that don't have this, right, as exceptions. So basically, if someone would click on it, hey, you don't have 2 monitors. Here's people that don't. Why do we care, right? There's a third field, a recommendation. So this is only shown if we have exceptions. And this is where you get the rationale, because again, you don't just want to hammer down people and show them that they have 18,000 points of risk. It doesn't help me at all, right? We want to make sure that we say, hey, because if you don't have these, it's productivity risk, right? People have proven it, jam references and your own, what you've seen across the board in here. And now you have both a way to market and rationale. So what about testing? This is the one that I skipped, but it's one of the ones that, like, again, you don't necessarily have to. A lot of people skip this right now. So Cloud Radial's agent, right, the one, especially because we're talking about it right now, is Windows only. However, we partner with Adigy, which is a kick-ass Mac RMM. So we have the ability to pull in Mac stuff from Adigy. So you're going to see that there's a chance to choose which operating systems does this apply to. There are plans to go with a Cloud Radial Mac agent, right? That's not out of the realm of possibility, certainly. So what we already did beforehand is we basically give you a toggle saying which policies apply to. 99% of people are going to toggle this for all, so it's kind of something you can skip. Same thing for device type, right? If you want to have specific policies that apply to specific types of devices, you certainly may. And then also, this boy is really important, the parameter. So this is what I was talking about before that can really screw you if you don't know what this is. In this case, right? Hey, it's the minimum number of monitors recommended. I use dual, so that implies 2. Great. In security, right, you might need to write your security vendor. In the RAM count, right, you might want to write the number of gigs of RAM. And the Office 365 licensed ones, you might want to specify the license. There's stuff like that that you want to be able to go into. And this is where, again, I referenced that one article, that policy parameters one. So this one, yes, it gives a big list of technical details about how it looks for it, but it also gives you a high level snapshot, right? We're looking at it right here of what does and does not contain parameters. So for example, if I look at free space available, okay, this is what it does off the thing. It's a numeric thing, right? Type's numeric. And the parameter is the free space percentage, 10%, right? So this article is super duper handy because sometimes you'll run into some stuff that it says like parameter of this, and it says 1600. You go, I have no clue what 1600 means. So this article, short of having to make this UI nightmarishly long with explanations, is basically a supplementary thing to do it. So again, super helpful. So we're good with this. Like I said, I'm not really going to modify it. The alerting, right? If I wanted to set those triggers up, like I mentioned, you could certainly flip this on. And what'll happen is if I do that, right, I have to pair it with another thing. So this is going to say, if I don't find those 2 monitors, send me a ticket. Let me know who doesn't have them so I can go correct that. And the way that you want to do that is if you're going to do those triggers, make sure that when you set this up, right, double check the routing, because if anyone here is familiar with the ticketing module, right, exact same ticketing routing capabilities. I can choose exactly to what board or queue with what status priority, right? Depending on what PSA you've connected, different PSA settings show up here, but you've got all these different options to kind of fire off wherever you need it to be. Like I said, not terribly utilized, certainly helpful, but it's not utilized, not because it's bad, but because people already have stuff in place to look for this. But if you want to trigger it, go right ahead. Little checkbox right here. Last but not least, in fact, maybe the most, is the risk scoring. So great, I know it's looking for monitors. I know it's looking for 2 of them. I've kind of customized a little bit. What about when it finds it in an exception, right? What if it finds that somebody didn't have the thing? How does that fall under, what category does that fall under? Now, again, most of these are going to be preset, right, to their best approximation of what we think they fall under as far as like business case. You can override that, right? So if you look at the categories, right, you've got all these different types of categories. And again, they're kind of based off this strategic hierarchy, right? Some of the stuff is like just basic. Efficiency is just something you want to kind of get out of the way. But selling another monitor to people is really hard if you come up going, hey, do you want another monitor? And then they're like, no, I got one. Why would you say that? Right? But if you come at it like, hey, we know that dual monitors have 50% more productivity, then all of a sudden you've got a discussion that goes way beyond just the, can I sell you something you don't have? Right? It's talking about something that's genuinely helpful in a business sense. So when you do these policies, really try to think about why you would ever bring this up in the first place and how this really helps. So in this case, I think productivity is spot on. We want to sell the idea of not having dual monitors as a productivity issue. Now the risk score. So this is another one we need to kind of take a look at. So the risk score, and I'll open up a new tab, we'll talk about that, is based off of, or rather the stoplight colors are based off of the risk scores. So what's happening here when we first looked at it is this big wrap up of all these different policies, right? And you clearly see that there's red, yellow, green, cool. Now, when you look at these other tabs over here, this is the same policies we're looking at here, just broken down in different ways. So why do we do that? Because Cloud Radial is looking at these policies, again, in a client-facing format here. But if we go to by category, what it's actually doing is it's going to split them up by a similar thing, but it's going to actually show you the numeric value of the score. So this is more for you than it is for the actual client. They can see it too. So same effect, right? If I click on it, it shows me the same stuff and all that. But what I'm really doing with this is I want to know what's the score invoked. And the scoring parameters are actually really simple. Basically, what happens is if the score is over 100, it's going to be flagged red. Between 1 and 99, it's yellow. And a score of 0 is green, right? So I think we have one green. It's actually not even on here. It's the collaboration one. But that's the score. So you can see that a score of 1700 is way past it. And it's okay. I mean, these are arbitrary numbers. They don't really mean anything. This is based off of how you put the value on these. So this is going to show you why this is red, right? Why is productivity red? Well, because it's a 1700. Decision making should be yellow because it's only at 75. Is that right? Yeah, for sure. And the last one is just a straight up, even more technical view where it's literally done by type of asset, right? Here's how you do the endpoints. I don't really like to show this for this kind of webinar and conversation because really this thing that people want to know, well, why is that yellow? Why is that? Is really by category, right? So this is the one you want to look at if you're trying to figure out why certain ones are yellow, green, or whatever. So where does that leave us? That leaves us that when we're trying to decide what to score these policies, it's up to you on how hard you want to bring the hammer down on people, right? In this case, right, what I'm saying here is that it's a productivity risk, okay? It's going to incur a score of 5. 5 what? 5 points? Yeah, for each occurrence. So basically, every time I don't find 2 monitors on a computer, tally on 5. That may work great for a 10-person, 5-person, 2-person environment, right? You guys don't have good things? Oh, that's 2 people, that's 10 points of risk. Okay. In a company that has, say, 800 computers, inevitably you're going to find, let's say, 50, right? That doesn't seem that bad. That's most of them have it. But with 5 times 50, that's 250 already in the red. Some MSPs adore that because they want to show them that there's a lot of small things that tally up really badly, right? That are really easy to address. Other people, they don't want to get dramatic. And it's really hard to scale that because obviously, even if you put the risk score at 1, the more computers and deployments you have out there, the harder it is to actually attain a reasonable yellow or green score. So what's your other option? The other option is to switch the scoring methodology. There's 2 different ones. This one is preferred if you have a lot of people or if you want to kind of get clever with it, any occurrence. So what this is going to do is it's not going to keep tallying up, right? It's going to say, if I find even 1 person in the entire company that doesn't have 2 monitors, slap 5 points of risk on there. If I find 1,000 people that don't have it, still 5 points of risk, right? Until everybody is down and fixed, then I'll remove that 5 points. In bigger environments, it scales a lot better, right? So that way you don't end up with scores of 29 trillion that are basically impossible to get to, oh, yellow, and you're kind of proving progress. So it's worth the time to kind of think about how you want to score these, right? Again, totally up to you. You might be fine with seeing those big scores and relishing and talking to them, but that's up to you. So in this case, I'm okay with this, right? We kind of understand the type and the policy and blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to just launch it off. So now what it's going to do is it's going to create it. And in this case, it's going to go under productivity. Now, what? I just added it. It's not here. Why is it not here? Well, I just did it for an agent policy, right? The way that Cloud Radial does it is that whenever I add it in, right, it's not immediately going to go, oh yeah, I know exactly who has it. That agent is going to report into Cloud Radial once a day. This information that we looked at earlier is going to get refreshed once a day. So what Cloud Radial does, both to reduce load times, because it can get atrocious if we did this all the time, and also just make this process automated, is once per day, once the agents check in, the policies are going to check in as well. So it's basically going to go fresh data, fresh policy check, fresh data, fresh policy check. So what I just did is I just told Cloud Radial, new policy, get at it. And Cloud Radial is going to go, cool, give me till midnight tonight, right? So it's going to be a bit till it does it. You don't have to wait that long, right? So if you're cool with it, right, obviously as you're developing these policies, you're not in a rush, you just want to check it, that's cool. If you want to force the sync right now, let's just go ahead and run the policies against our current data set and see where we land. So little sync button up here, go ahead and slap that button. And what's going to do in the background is going to go, okay, policy scan job has been scheduled. So for those that are impatient like myself, right, especially on a webinar, I'm like, I got to show you. If you go to the left-hand side under alerting and jobs, if you have this tab, right, unless you disabled it, what you're going to see is the things that Cloud Radial is doing in the background. Typically, it doesn't take all that long to do it, depending on how many new policies and the number of agents and blah, blah, blah. But basically, it's literally going through that list before that we saw and just cross-checking, cross-checking, cross-checking. So once this is complete, we'll check back and we'll see where the monitor count lands, right? We'll see how it stacks up and how it feels and all that kind of stuff. So in essence, let me double check and see if I missed anything. That's it. So you can see that the process itself isn't terribly difficult. It just can be time consuming because when you really look at it, you're really being asked to parse out what you actually care about. It's going to have a lot of stuff that you don't care about, right? So maybe when you look at endpoints, you go, I don't care at all about if Windows Defender is doing full scans or when the last full scan happened, right? Maybe that's not a thing. So that's okay. You skip that entirely. But what I just did during this webinar, that's not going to scale at all, right? The way I just did it is that's one policy for one client and I have 800. So probably not, right? So that's what I was saying before about the content. So a really brief lesson in content, because obviously there's a lot of different types of variances and stuff here, but generally speaking, because Cloud Radial functions on a, let's call it container-based system, right? Every single company you have is listed under partner clients, and they're their own little separate entity, right? So in this demo account, the one I just messed with was Digital Efforts, but I got a whole other bunch of people to do. I'm not going to go client by client developing custom policies. That's going to take forever. So what you want to do, rather than what I just did, is you want to develop these at a global level, like your global standards. And then if you need to vary off that, cool, that's a little tweak here and there, right? So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to go to our partner content area. This is our global repository, our distribution area. I call this 1,000 different things. It's the place we put stuff that goes down to multiple clients, not just one at a time. And pretty much everything in Cloud Radial works like this. Again, I won't give a super detailed explanation because that might just take a bunch of time. But whether it's articles or assessments or courses or whatever, right? We talk about it all the time. Creating this kind of like top-down approach of content is the key. So that's cool. So what I'm doing right now is I'm minimizing everything that's not policies. And hey, look at that. There's a section for policy lists. In fact, if you wonder why you guys, when you first start out, have those policies, chances are, if you look in your content, you've got your policy list sitting right there, and this is where they're derived from. That's how they have them, all coming from there. So same idea. If I go to this content area and I click on these guys, I'm going to see all those different policies. The same exact ones I basically saw line itemed, but they're the same thing. So for example, hey, look at encrypted hard drive. If I click on that guy, pretty familiar screen. It's literally the same stuff we just saw. Cool. So same thing, right? Same exact process. I can go through and I can add these. And this is really where you want to do is if you're doing your pruning of your sample stuff, if you're wanting to add new stuff, definitely recommend building it from here first, because that way you can push it down a lot easier. And that gives you a great way to scale it, right? Because what you can do then is you can basically push your policy standards to however many people. In that jumpstart I mentioned before, one of the things that we do when we work with it is we work on this policy list. And then basically the checklist is that when you add a new client, you basically just have to create their container, deploy some agents, and what'll happen is the moment the agent checks in, policies run. So within like 2 minutes of adding the client, you already have something that if they're a prospect or whatever, you can go straight to their policy list and go, hey, I already know there's a lot of stuff that we would want to work on if we're your client, right? For prospects, for example, you go, hey, here's all these different opportunities that we could do to both boost your productivity and compliance. Really freaking easy, really freaking tangible. And the client now goes, oh, okay, I want to get this to green. It's human nature. People don't like red unless it's like sports cars. So pretty good. So when we look at all this kind of stuff, we're like, okay, still, I've talked for what, 35 minutes so far ish. And I've really just told you about how to work these policies. Now, pat on the back because it's pretty good stuff, right? We have some stuff that is really important. That's really good to show. Now we have something we could talk through. But again, we want to make sure that this stuff is working in tandem with everything else. So that one slide I showed back in that PowerPoint, which I'm looking over there for, is basically, oh, I forgot. See, glad I had the PowerPoint. I wanted to look at how to do exceptions. That's right. So let's just take one of these guys right here. So let's do continuity, right? There's some continuity issues going on here. Old technology with the server. You hate to see it. When you click on this guy, what it's going to do is it's going to go, hey, look at these servers, right? They're old. Now, in this case, I believe this is based off of the age of the processor. There's also by ship date and all that kind of stuff. So again, check out that article to find out what works best for you. But let's just say in this case, this AZ Cloud Server 1, you know what? It's a gate server mechanism thing that literally just opens the front gate at this compound. Like, yeah, it's old, but it's secure and whatever. Like, I don't want the client being flagged for this. Or maybe, right, the other thing is that Cloud Radio is straight up wrong. There might be something that the agent looks for in a certain way. That's not how it is, right? It tricked it out somehow. What do I do? If that's the case, again, you're not screwed. You don't have to sit there explain to the client, lose their trust. In fact, you want to get in front of it. You want to say, hey, we know how this software works. It looks for this, this, this. I encourage you to be as open with how it works, like I'm doing to you, with you to them, right? Because you can show them your cards. That's even stronger. You're like, hey, I know exactly how it checks it. So if it fails and I give you the okay, I'm going to go ahead and click on these dots and literally mark it as an exception. So what Cloud Radio is saying is like, hey, are you cool with this? You sure you don't want to? And I go, I'm sure. And what it's going to do is it's going to do a strike through. So let's do it for both of these guys. What's going to happen now? So when I do it for both of these guys, basically it's going to say, okay, I believe that was under continuity, right? We did that for old technology for server. So it's right here, this very first one. Watch this. So when I refresh, it's not going to go away. You know that. Why not? What? It's going to reduce the score. Now, it just so happens that this is still above 100, so it didn't change colors. But what's going to happen is that now when I click on these guys, it's going to say, hey, we know about these, and whether it's a glitch or bug or just something that passes, that's cool, but we're still going to mark them, right? We're not going to just send things to the ether and say like, oh, I don't know. Because we want to have, and we're going to talk about this in a sec too for compliance sake, we want to have a paper trail of stuff all the time because especially for compliancy, 90% of it is documentation, right? You can see as I talk, I'm going to untoggle. Same thing, very easy to say, actually, it is a problem. Just do the same thing in reverse. Compliancy is going to be really key here because, yeah, we're talking about this. And obviously, I've come from this very heavy with the sales perspective and I want to show them where the opportunities are and the risks, blah, blah, blah. But as we'll see in a moment, some of this stuff isn't on you, right? You might have walked into a total mess of an environment. That's not your fault. But it will be your fault legally if something happens. So you don't want that, right? So how can you avoid that? Well, you want to have as much documentation as possible. In fact, if you have documentation that the client has readily available 24/7, like in a client portal, right? That's pretty helpful. And we're going to look at how to do that momentarily as soon as I look over here and see what I missed. Nope, I didn't miss anything. Cool. All right. So let's look at this first integrator client strategy, and then we'll talk about that compliance thing a little bit deeper. So greater client strategy, how does that work? Well, okay, we've got all these guys. They are now set. Let's say this is as good as it's going to get. We have exact understanding of where stuff is, how it works, what it's looking for, what it's not looking for, exceptions. Perfect. What about the 18,000 other things? Hey, look at that. I completed it. What about the 18,000 other things you do? Also, look at that. Dual monitor check. Whoa. My guess is, oh, look, literally all of these fake computers don't have monitors. Pretty good. But anyways, so what about if you have those 18,000 other things and you want to make sure that those are wrapped up and easily accessible, right? This is a reporting conversation. This is a conversation that should spur action. So policies don't just do it, right? Do you see anything about firewalls? Do you see anything about, I don't know, I can't even think of an example, but you know what I'm talking about, right? There's lots of other stuff that Cloud Radio can't get that needs to be included because it both shows that you're You're doing what you paid for, right? There's a reason you can charge what you charge per seat, because you're doing your due diligence and they're getting what they're paying for. You just got to show that to them, right? So this is definitely an easy way to show it. Honorable mention to, for example, a report archives. This is not a report archive webinar, so I won't go too deep, but this is generally the place where you can jam third-party reports from anything, right? Other vendors. I'm at a conference with other vendors. We say hi. We're not hostile towards them. Throw your other vendor stuff in here. We like them. And, among other things, right? So there might be maybe assessment reports. There might be the Cloud Radio wrap-up report. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. So it tells a greater story. Now, again, what I really want to focus on is that's step one, right? The policies are one subset. All the other reports are a bigger subset. What are we going to do with all that data? Well, if you're looking at this really objectively and doing it right, you're not monitoring this every single frickin' day, because that's a lot of work to do. You want to get this as close to set it and forget it as you can. So when an account manager checks in every, let's do the Q and QBR for quarterly, right? So let's do 90 days. They know that they have all the historic data. They know it's been aggregating, whatever. So your job during that QBR, or whatever you want to call the business review, is really simple. It's just to interpret the data and determine what's the most important part. What do we want to tackle? What would we like to see, but we don't have to, right? The client has that in a place that they can access 24/7. So again, it's been there. Compliance is there. So the last part of this is let's get some action going. So I mentioned in that PowerPoint slide that we're going to talk about the planner. So the planner and Cloud Radio, and again, we'd like you to use ours because it's all in one, great strategy. But even if you don't, right, that's okay. We want you to just use this tool to help you drive the greater discussion. In Cloud Radio, we have the planner, right? Really simple, card-based view, got 4 quarters, got, installed. Core premise here, right, is basically show them what you can do under your recommended, so your services and projects and whatnot, show them what you're gonna be doing, and show them what you've done. So that way it's really easy for them to kind of get a quick idea of like, what have you done? What am I paying you for? That's right. I see all those things. Cool. So when we take a look at all the stuff we talked about with policies, how do we take those and make them actionable rather than just pointing at the portal and going, We basically want to use the stuff that we know to point out, like I said, what's the higher level stuff? Compliance. Let's go to policies. So let's say that, yeah, it would be nice if everyone had dual monitors. That'd be really cool. But hey, I noticed that you don't have AV on your main server, right? And you just so happen to be a dental clinic that complies to HIPAA. So that's a big no-no for both of us, right? Got to have it. What do we do? We want to basically take the stuff that we see, and Cloud Radio is pretty generous with this add to planner button. Using those data points, again, an account manager's job should be to skim through, find the stuff that they think is important, the stuff that's addressable, it's actionable, build that plan of action. So we're going to throw that on the planner, right? So it's going to basically hit you with a very similar thing. The policies and the planner are actually a lot closer than most people think because they use a very, very, very similar framework. Category, what's that? Well, guess what? It's the same thing we saw before. So this is definitely a security thing. Title, resolve the policy exception, right? That's pretty generic. So if it's just a bunch of them, you can. In this case, I'm going to go server security. And then short summary, right? Feel free to write whatever. So in this case, we go cloud servers are great. And then it tells you which ones they are. And obviously you can jot down your notes. So it doesn't have to take years and years, just basically point, type some notes in and send it off. Repeat for whatever else that you think is important. So what'll happen now is imagine you do that in the policies. Imagine you do that in your third-party reports. Hey, those audit reports, ran those too. We ran some network stuff. Saw some bad things too. So we have multiple tools, cross-correlating, cross-referencing. There's a lot of bad stuff going on, and I want to handle that. So when I go back down to the planner and I've done my research, what I'm going to end up with is those cards that I just added under recommended. And now what I do is I have something to bring to the table. So when I do the discussion, am I going to be looking at the policies? Am I going to be running through every single agent line item? No, unless you hate your clients, which maybe. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be giving them the high level view. And then basically what you do is you go, hey, I'm going to recommend that we do this as soon as possible. This one, right? Managed security. So here's our security offering. Here's what it entails. If you don't have something like this in place, right? You're basically pitching stuff to pitch it. You might hand them a flyer. You might say security is important. You might beg. You might get angry and make them sign a waiver saying, I decline the service, which, by the way, just found out that is not hold up in court. Really useful stuff here at this conference. But basically, you want to have that paper trail that says, like, hey, we did this, right? And if you can, what you can now correlate with it is you go, hey, I'm not just saying that out of the blue. I'm saying that because I can literally prove that this is not a thing, right? So again, it's not just this, I think we should because it's important. You have a full backed rationale plan. So when you go to have that conversation, it should be as easy as like, hey, policies are telling me this. You can cross check them if you like, right? I'm cross checking this and it's in fact true. We don't have any security. You're in a regulated space. Like, we got to add this extra thing, right? Maybe this isn't even covered by our typical contract. We have to go above and beyond. Great. You now have a really, really easy way to do that case. And if you want to, right, the other thing that you could do is obviously the slam dunk scenarios, the client now has context you can bounce between. They go, well, what do you mean by that? Well, like, what else? What is this? You go, oh, let me show you. So we've been monitoring you on blah, 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 right? So you can start talking through it and you have that there. Again, your power here is both that you can explain it and that when you walk away, they still have it. The information isn't gone. It's not a paper that they ball up and throw away. It's their freaking portal. It's there. It's not going away. So they have to address it one way or another, and not addressing it is a way to address it. So whenever you get up and walk away, right, the ideal thing is that now they understand the need. You've set the case. They have all the context they need, and stuff gets moved over to installed, right? You go, okay, cool. We're going to be implementing this. And there's a whole thing about how to use the planner, but policy webinar. And then the other thing you can do too is that, let's say they don't do this, right? That's the other thing. You want to basically make sure that you notate that, because again, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, especially for policies, like, yeah, again, compliance, or I'm sorry, upsell, cool. Opportunities, certainly, but compliance really important, because again, you're on the hook for a lot of these guys, and it's really annoying because you knew about it. It's not your fault, but you have to make sure that that paper trail is there, because if someone else comes in, you don't want them throwing up all your RMM reports and taking a look at all your stuff, because it's really annoying. If you use the portal both as a place to store everything and log all these changes, log all these recommendations, and all of a sudden it becomes really easy to go, auditor, go check it out. 6 months ago, I recommended it. 3 months ago, I reported. 2 months ago, I said it. 1 month ago, they said no. Today, they got breached. What am I going to do? Right? So when I look at all this stuff, I basically can go in here. Again, I'm having the conversation. I take it really pessimistic, by the way. We don't have to go that dark. But basically, they come in here and they can go, hey, right? Talk to Ricky, me, and he said, I'll think about it. You don't have to be this passive aggressive. This is just my spice. Right? So maybe he says no, or maybe he says we'll come back in 3 months or whatever. You basically want to put a thing that says like, okay, there's declined, right? Open declination. You want to make sure that the people have the remediation to this, right? It's like, not this is the end of the world. It's not like this is thing, but you want to make sure that it's very clear that it's a them problem, not a you problem, not a we problem. It's a you problem, right? If this is not covered under your statement of work, right? This is not a part of it, and we discover it, then it's something we actively want to bring to their attention and talk about it. Again, this is huge, 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 huge ramifications for compliance. And maybe it is covered under the SOW, right? Maybe this is on you for real to take care of. That's still okay, because what you're doing now is you see it, they see it, it holds you more accountable. And what you're doing is you basically get to say, hey, I'm giving you the transparency that both of us need to hop in here, take a look at what kind of a mess it is. And you really shouldn't be having the problem where they go, well, what do you do for us? I was like, what do I do for you? I took your extremely red environment, applied it against all these standards that put you, compliant against a, and again, if we use HIPAA, right, maybe I applied a NIST framework against that HIPAA stuff. All of a sudden, I turned it to green. And I have the paper trail showing you what I recommended, how I recommended it, how we went about that, what I had to do with it, right? This snowballs into a complete client strategy just from friggin' what, right? 2 monitors, dual monitors, click on that. It's really, really effective. And again, if you think of it from the micro level, this all can really happen if you standardize how you do it, right? Nobody has the time to do this for even one client, right? It could be really, really complex. So you want to make sure that wherever you can, you apply these standardizations and you kind of go on from there. Let me see if I missed anything else there. I don't believe so. And 10 minutes seems like a healthy amount to leave for Q&A and or stuff. Safi, did you hop on? I just want to say hop on. You on here? Maybe. Yeah, you are. You're muted. But that's okay. Let me bring back my questions. Oh, a lot of stuff. All right, so let's go through. All right. Felicia says, thresholds evaluated need to be tuned. Miscategorizing storage.
Slack in there, Ricky. Sorry.
I was about to say, I was like, where you been, man? I need your help. What are we working with? Are you? Can you help me with any Q&A stuff?
Yeah, let me run through with you a little
Felicia
bit.
stuff. I got the Q&A stuff.
Got two sets of, let's just run through them real quick.
I know.
We may have covered.
We do the Q&A and then also the chat. So like I always get confused as to which one I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, I do too. So Felicia said, I'm not seeing where the thresholds for the evaluated parameters are able to be tuned. Policies are miscategorizing storage.
It depends which policies there are. Because like some of them are binary, right? Some of them don't have parameters. So for example, I think like is encrypted storage, for example, like you'll see that frequently where I always refer to them as binary. That may not be the correct term, but basically it's on off, right? Maybe that is binary. So it's like if I go to like encrypted hard drive, it basically looks for it or not. Now, to Felicia's point, a lot of times what happens, and this one's one that we talk about a lot, like a lot of people talk about it in general, is it like which drive? The C drive, D drive, thumb drive, external drive? What should be encrypted, right? So there's always spots for us to go back and keep doing it. But like I said, it's a conversation starter, right? So it's like the conversation is you have unencrypted stuff. Stop plugging in unencrypted stuff in your computer in the first place. What's the point of having an encrypted drive if you plug in unencrypted drives in the first place, right? Maybe. Other times there's just dumb stuff. So like really, we've seen it many times that they might have a recovery drive plugged in. That's not. So there's certainly room for expansions in the first place. Other ones, again, we'll have the parameter thing. The parameter is always going to be hosted under the, I think it's under testing. If I go to like monitor count, yeah, required parameter right there. Depends. What else you got, Safi? If you see them.
So Bill Sullivan, for device type in the create policy, can you select a desktop or laptop while excluding virtual?
Well, I think you'd have to create two policies for it because right now the way that it works is you literally set up one for the policy, like one for this, one for that. It's not like a this and this. It literally is just this is laptop, this is desktop. The way that we handle it right now, if you look at it, kind of similar to what we did for the old technology example, right? The old technology desk server. So it could be like, CPU for laptop, CPU for desktop, and that way it's two.
Yeah, and Felicia, on some of yours, and I don't mean to punch it, but I think some of these might be better.
It seems like some of them are just bugs.
Yeah, if you talk to support, I would do that and schedule a session with Evan and let him kind of go through those individually and see if they're set up wrong or issues on our side, your side, because he can kind of dig through that. I think that would be better. You'd be better served doing it that way.
For those that don't know, because I talked to Felicia a while ago, but Felicia is like real deep into compliance stuff, so she really, really, really knows her stuff. So
she's like a super user.
Yeah. So like when Felicia says XYZ doesn't work, it's one of those things that you go like, we'll go work on it. It's not one of those things that go, it's fine. So for sure. But yeah, if we could pull those over to dev, because there's, like I said, not perfect, right? There's plenty of stuff that either needs to be further parametered, or if there's legitimate bugs in there, then that's not good, right? That's where we kind of draw the line. I said it's okay if we have some errors here and there, but obviously if like the virtual machine is misreporting as like the laptop, no, right? We got to fix that ASAP. So if you found that already, just let us know. We'll fix it.
And then there was one question about, when you add something to the planner, does it send an email notification? And it does not. We want the planner to be more of a collaborative space to work with your client and to prepare to present with your client. And so if each time you're adding things to that planner, it's spilling out an email, that could get a little bit convoluted. But I mean, it's actually something we could consider down the road.
Yeah, well, I wanted to talk about that too.
Turn on and off.
Yeah, we were talking about the idea of maybe even doing like a wrap up, because like we use a lot of project management stuff internally, right? As I'm sure you guys do too. And like there's a certain thing that rhymes with Sunday that is a tool based off a day of the week that sends an email for every time you click a button. And I think I have like 1,800 emails from them in the past like month. And I'm like, if Cloud Radial turns into that, so I think like we've considered that, maybe doing something clever with a wrap up report. So no, it doesn't, but also we're cognizant that it would be helpful. We just have to figure out a non-annoying way of doing it, really.
And then Norbert, and I hadn't heard from Norbert in a while.
Hey, Norb.
Hey, Norb. Can you also use it for if an application appears, then alert?
Yeah. One of the ones that you can do is, well, there's two different ways of doing that. One of them is a little bit more manual. One of the types of policies is application. And this one's a little bit more of a deep cut. I didn't think it was really appropriate for the webinar because it's like there's a bit of effort, and I think we've got to polish this. But there's a certain thing that you could do, like a category of an application, because what happens is when the Cloud Radio agent goes on the computer or server, it spits out a list of software, right? So a lot of times that software list is used for like AV and whatnot. But like what about like when World of Warcraft comes in and you want to know about it? Like certainly you don't have to go there and thinking like, oh, League of Legends, World of Warcraft, like whatever needs to be downloaded. So what we do is if you go to that infrastructure tab and there's actually a software list, this is a wrap up roll up list of all the software in general. And that wrap up roll up list has software tagged by categories. So depending on what it is, right, it'll tell you, it's like, hey, this is a utility, this is a whatever. So like what the way to do it is if you know of a certain thing, probably just tag it, and then you can slap that thing. So basically what you do is you go category games, if a new game pops up, bam, right, snaps them down, that type of thing. Or, and I didn't bring that up because again, it requires you to tag the software, it's a whole thing. If you just know it straight up, then the best one to do for the endpoint or server is going to be software installed or software not installed. I believe software not installed is the one you want. That's the one that says like, hey, make sure that this is not on your computer. And if it is, hammer. And this one's Spotify as an example. But
Okay, so if the policy is set to cut a ticket every time something occurs, this was the question. Does it create the ticket once and then know not to open it when the first ticket's opened, or does it keep, basically he's asking about noise. You know, is it going to keep?
Additional alerts are suppressed until resolved. So I think what'll happen is literally every time it scans, it's like really annoying about it, if I recall correctly. I don't think it does it once and going like, oh, okay, we sent to take it open or whatever. It literally just,
yeah, I think we're gonna like keep pounding just so that it gets fixed, or that
that's
you know
why
about
for a
it.
lot of people, again, I'm telling you from the heart, I'm not talking about like webinar Ricky, I'm talking about like guy on the phone that talks to you. I don't, for most of these things, I wouldn't do it. If there's like a specific thing that Cloud Radio can look for that your RMM can't, then yeah. But for most people, like we've gotten lots of people that are like, I'm really annoyed because it sends it over and over again. Because yeah, it's just going to keep doing it until you resolve it. It's annoying on purpose.
And I think last question from Bill Sullivan, can you tag software globally?
No, that's another one of those things that I believe we should, like we have to do. Because as far as I understand or remember, when you go to the software, what he's talking about is like, take like my example right here, tools for .NET, right? If I hit that software and I edit it, again, I'm under infrastructure software, I can tag it. But what happens is, you know, I put whatever category, whatever, and then if I bounce to the next guy, this isn't globally defined. Mostly that's an issue. I'll tell you why software wise, because like when they report in, if the characters are spaced off, if there's different versions, they count as completely different software. So it's kind of hard, but in short, we should be doing that in the first place. But yeah, no, right now they're not global.
Okay, I think I've caught them all. I think we're caught up. So just kind of wanted to thank everybody today. I'm sorry I was in the background.
Are you doing actual work?
I was kind of multitasking. Okay, I'm busted.
Are you doing real work? Don't do real work. Answer my questions.
Working.
No.
Yeah.
Why?
Did you tell everybody where you are?
Yeah, I'm in Vegas. I'm at Kaseya.
Vegas.
It was a good time.
Fun.
I gotta hit the roulette in like 2 minutes, so I gotta go, guys. I'm sorry.
All right. Y'all have a great day. Thanks, Ricky, so much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I'll catch you guys for the next one, and have a good one.
Bye.